Adobe Express page called Saving Coral, the Process of Coral Restoration, and talk a little bit about the strengths of this. So visually, when you look at this, what can you tell me about the visual rhetoric of the opening of this? Yeah. Yeah. Right? I mean, it's got pictures of coral. So if you had black or something, it may not be as impactful. So their title clearly states their position, which is interesting. And then they go on, and they have this great line from their poem as their next section. And look at this line, pure coral, bleaching, bleached. And I love the poetics of that line, right? And then they say this is the opening line from Ode to Coral Reef by Alex Curtis, and acts as a succinct display of the process of coral bleaching. And so they picked that line from the poem that they had chosen, and they put that in strategically. And then as you scroll down, they have their background section. And they start their background section with a question, what is the coral reef? Right? And then as you scroll down, it talks a little bit about polyps and what they are and how they form. And there's a really nice graph right there, infographic that shows how they form. And then they talk about the vibrant colors of the reefs and why coral is important. And then as you scroll down, they talk about the process of bleaching and discuss again what happens when coral becomes bleached. And then they give us a background section of how long it's taken for this progression of bleaching to start. And their claim is that it started around 1983, between 1983 and 1998. So we have a little bit of an understanding of the timeline of coral bleaching. And then as you scroll down, it talks about the idea or how coral dies. So, and then they talk about what can be done is their next question. They have their research question, how effective is coral gardening and outplanting in solving the effects of coral bleaching from an environmental and socioeconomic standpoint. So they're looking now at, they've explained coral reefs, coral bleaching, and now they're looking at coral gardening as a potential solution and talking about the pros and cons of this type of solution. So they've taken that idea of coral reef bleaching and directed it to critically assess solutions that have been put into place to help coral bleaching. And then they have, again, the overview. And they have their structure there that they're going to talk about laid out. And then, again, this information they already briefly introduced, and now they have it in bullet point format. And so they're continuing to explain. And now they have the environmental pros of that idea of coral farming. And they can talk about that. And then they talk about the cons of coral farming. Introduces non-native species, can reduce coral biodiversity. Transplants might not succeed, so the failure rate, the idea that it inhibits natural wildlife. And then they go into socioeconomic pros, the idea of money through tourism, research on reefs brings money in, advancement in medical research brings money in, protects coastlines, and then they talk about the cons, the amount of money that it takes to do these things, the amount of time, the amount of labor. These make coral planting difficult and limit the scale. And then they have a quote from All We Can Save. There always will be a fear of defeat, but there's also knowledge that something is more important. The only failure would be to do nothing at all. And they talk about how that ties in. And then they talk about the idea, in the absence of action, our understanding is watching a loss become preserved as art. And so then they have their call to action. And then they have some ideas. Then they have their meme, and they strategically put their meme at the end. Coral now and coral then, and they have a meme with Trump in it. And then they talk about how the lightheartedness of the meme alleviates some of the tension of their argument. Talk about making life changes. And then have a suggestion for donating to coral gardens. And then look at that. Their works cited page is formatted beautifully and put on there, whether it's a screenshot or whether you have a link to a Google Doc. You need to have a 10-source works cited page available for the viewers. And if you look at this one, this was screenshotted, and you can tell that it was screenshotted because of the fact that they have put it into 2 sections. So that is great. And then they have their credits. So this was an example of a outstanding, superior presentation, and then their delivery and their ability to demonstrate working together was also a very successful part of this project. So this is available in Canvas for you to look at, and so you can certainly look back through this one and think about what it is that you could do to enhance yours.